"Beware, stranger, death rides these woods." The warning echoed through the mist-shrouded trees as Aldric struck his hammer against the glowing iron, each blow punctuating the silence that had been his only companion for 20 winters. Dawn had barely broken over Dravencroft, and already the old blacksmith's forge breathed fire and smoke like a wounded dragon. His weathered hands, covered in ancient scars and fresh burns, worked the metal with practiced precision, while his mind wandered far from this forgotten corner of Eldarion. The iron beneath his hammer would become a simple plow blade, no ornate hilts or royal insignias, no delicate filigree or noble crests. Those days were long past. The king's master blacksmith was now just Aldric of the Northern Road, a ghost who shaped metal for farmers and trappers, asking nothing but silence in return. 20 years, he muttered to himself, his voice rough from disuse. 20 years, and still the nightmares come. The memories surfaced unbidden. His wife Elora's laugh, his son Gareth's first steps, the gleaming halls of Eldarion Castle, where he had once crafted swords for knights and crowns for kings. Then came the accusations, the trial, the banishment, all because he had dared speak truth to power. Aldric plunged the hot metal into water, and steam hissed upward like the ghosts of all he had lost. His hair, once rich brown, now hung in silver-streaked tangles around his face. His eyes, once proud, now avoided even his own reflection in the water barrel. Outside, the warning cry came again, closer now. Aldric ignored it. Travelers often passed through these woods speaking of bandits or wolves. None ever stopped at his forge anymore. The royal road had been rerouted years ago, leaving this path to fade into wilderness. The third cry was different, desperate, feminine, followed by the thunder of hooves. "Please, open your doors, by the mercy of the old gods." Aldric's hands stilled. He set down his hammer slowly, reaching instead for the sword he kept beneath his workbench, a blade forged on the day of his son's birth, its edge still deadly sharp despite the years. "Who comes to my forge uninvited?" he called, his voice cracking from disuse. The pounding at his door intensified. "Daughters of the crown, our lives are forfeit if you deny us sanctuary." With reluctance born of suspicion, Aldric unbarred the heavy oak door. The sight that greeted him stole the breath from his lungs. 10 young women in fine riding clothes, now muddied and torn, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Their mounts bearing the unmistakable royal livery steamed in the cold morning air. The eldest stepped forward, dignity intact despite her disheveled appearance. "Are you Aldric the Smith, Queen Aveline's master of steel?" "I am no one's master now," he replied coldly, "and I have not heard that name spoken in 20 years. The girl, no, woman, raised her chin. In her features, Aldric recognized the queen he had once served. This must be Princess Seraphine, whom he had last seen as a toddling child in the royal nursery. "My mother said if all else failed, we should seek the man who forged the raven crown." She extended a trembling hand, upon which rested a signet ring, the royal seal of Eldarion, a raven in flight over a golden field. "She said you alone could be trusted when treachery had poisoned all else." The youngest of the group, a child of perhaps 12 summers, pushed forward. "Please, sir, they've killed everyone." Her small voice broke. "The palace guards, our tutors. Mother told us to run while she faced Lord Varen." Aldric's jaw tightened. Lord Varen, the same nobleman who had engineered his downfall 2 decades past. "Your mother should have sent you elsewhere. I am but one man, a forgotten smith." He turned away back to his forge, hiding the tremor in his hands. "The royal family left me to rot. Why should I risk what little I have left for them?" Seraphine's voice hardened. "Because you once swore an oath, Blacksmith, not to the crown but to the people of Eldarion." She stepped closer, into the heat of the forge. "And because my mother never believed you betrayed that oath." Aldric froze, the words striking deeper than any blade. "She named me regent in her absence," Seraphine continued. "And my first command is this: Aldric of Eldarion, I require your service. Not as a subject to a princess, but as one who loves this land to one who would defend it." Behind her, the 9 sisters watched in silence, the youngest clutching a wooden doll, a knight whose sword Aldric recognized as his own craftsmanship, a gift he had made for the royal nursery before his fall. Outside, a horn sounded in the distance, the royal hunting horn, now in the hands of usurpers. "They've found our trail," whispered one of the middle sisters, her hand moving to the dagger at her belt. Aldric looked at these daughters of nobility, women who had likely never known hunger or cold, now hunted like common criminals. Then he looked at his hands, calloused and strong despite the years, hands that had once shaped a kingdom's destiny. "Get inside," he said finally, his decision made. "Bar the door behind you." He turned to his forge, eyes falling on the unfinished plow blade. It would never be finished now. Instead, he reached for the chest buried beneath 20 years of dust in the corner, the chest containing his masterworks, The weapon's too fine to sell to farmers, too painful to destroy. I will need all of you to work, he said, his voice finding its old strength. If Lord Varen wants the daughters of Aveline, he will have to come through Aldric the Smith. The royal hunting horn sounded again, closer now, and for the first time in 20 years, Aldric smiled, a grim, dangerous smile that transformed his weathered face from that of a broken exile to the master blacksmith who had once been legend in Eldarion. Let us remind this kingdom what true steel sounds like. Dawn broke with the clatter of steel in desperate preparation. The forge that had known only solitude for decades now bustled with the activity of 11 souls united by necessity. Aldric moved with renewed purpose, his hands remembering skills long dormant as he distributed weapons from his hidden cache, daggers with eagle wing crossguards, short swords balanced for smaller hands, and a great battle axe he had forged for himself in younger days. I cannot make warriors of you in a single morning, he said, eyeing the princesses as they awkwardly hefted their new armaments, but I can teach you to survive. Princess Seraphine stood tall despite the weight of the sword in her hand. We are not entirely helpless, Blacksmith. Mother insisted we learn more than needlework and dancing. Aldric raised an eyebrow. Queen Aveline had always been unconventional, perhaps another reason Lord Varen had moved against her. Show me, he commanded. The princesses exchanged glances, before Seraphine nodded to a willowy girl of perhaps 16 summers. Ellen, demonstrate for our host. The girl stepped forward, her delicate features betraying no emotion as she took a fighting stance. With unexpected grace, she executed a series of precise movements with her dagger, the formal defensive patterns taught to royal guards. Court training, Aldric observed, unimpressed. Pretty, but useless in true combat. He moved suddenly, his large frame belying his speed as he swept Ellen's feet from under her. The princess landed hard on the packed earth floor. Out there, he pointed beyond the forge walls, your enemies won't follow tournament rules. The youngest princess, Liz, helped her sister to her feet. Our combat master said the same, she offered timidly, before Lord Varen had him executed for corrupting royal blood with commoner brutality. Something dark flickered across Aldric's face. Varen always did prefer his nobility untainted by practical knowledge. He extended a hand to Ellen. Again. This time, forget everything you were taught in the castle. For 2 hours, Aldric drilled the princesses in brutal, ungraceful survival techniques. How to gouge eyes, where to strike to disable an armored opponent, how to use their smaller statures to advantage. Some learned quicker than others. The twins, Briar and Brenna, moved with natural coordination. Young Lys showed surprising ferocity, while Seraphine fought with calculating precision. As midday approached, Aldric sent 2 of the middle sisters, Mael and Isolde, to watch the road. He turned his attention to fortifying the forge. With Seraphine's help, he dragged heavy anvils to barricade the side entrance, then unrolled a dusty oilcloth to reveal a collection of caltrops, wicked 4-pointed metal stars designed to lame horses. I had forgotten these existed, he murmured, running a finger along the razor edges. Made them for the northern campaign. Before your exile, Seraphine finished quietly. Mother never spoke of it, but court whispers reached even the royal nursery. They said you threatened the king. Aldric's face hardened. I threatened no one. I merely refused to forge weapons that would be used against our own people. He scattered the caltrops in a wide arc outside the forge's main entrance. Your grandfather wanted arms to suppress tax rebellions in the western provinces. I told him hungry farmers needed bread, not sword points. Understanding dawned in Seraphine's eyes. So Varen arranged your downfall. Varen saw opportunity. I gave him the opening. Aldric paused, then added quietly, the old king was not an evil man, merely a sheltered one. Varen poisoned his mind against me, as he has now poisoned the court against your mother. A shout from the road interrupted them. Mal came running, her face flushed with exertion. Riders, a dozen at least, bearing Lord Varen's emerald banner. Aldric cursed, grabbing his axe. Earlier than expected. Inside all of you. The princesses scrambled to take positions as Aldric had instructed them. Lys and the youngest 3 hidden in the sleeping loft. The twins at the rear window with bows. The others positioned strategically throughout the forge. Seraphine stood at Aldric's side, refusing to hide. The riders approached cautiously, having spotted the caltrops. Their leader, a knight in ornate armor bearing Varen's crest of serpent and sword, raised his visor. By order of Lord Protector Varen, Regent of Eldarion, I demand you surrender the traitor princesses. His voice carried the cultured accent of the capital's nobility. Aldric stepped out, keeping within the protective shadow of the forge doorway. This is private property, Sir Knight. There are no princesses here, only an old blacksmith who wishes to be left in peace. The knight's laugh was cold. Peace is a luxury reserved for the loyal. Aldric the exile, he gestured to the forge. Your reputation precedes you, though it has diminished with the years. Once the king's master blacksmith, blacksmith, now harboring traitors in a forgotten hovel. Beside him, Aldric felt Seraphine tense at the insult. He placed a restraining hand on her arm. "I harbor no one," Aldric replied evenly, "but neither do I welcome uninvited guests who speak of loyalty while serving usurpers." The knight's face darkened with rage. "Your insolence hasn't lessened with age. Lord Varen remembers your defiance well. He has promised a special reward for your head." He turned to his men. "Search the forge, bring out the royal spawn, and don't be gentle." 3 riders dismounted, carefully picking their way through the caltrops. As they approached, Aldric's grip tightened on his axe. "Last warning, gentlemen. This is my home and my forge. Cross that threshold uninvited and I cannot guarantee your safety." The lead knight sneered, the legendary blacksmith reduced to empty threats. "Look at you, gray, bent, forgotten. What could you possibly—" His words cut off as Aldric moved with unexpected speed, his massive axe whistling through the air to embed itself in the doorframe, mere inches from the advancing soldier's face. "I said," Aldric's voice dropped to a dangerous growl, "this is my home." For a moment, silence hung in the air like the moment between lightning and thunder. Then the knight's face contorted with fury. "Kill him! Find the princesses! Burn this hovel to the ground!" Chaos erupted as the soldiers charged. Inside the forge, Seraphine drew her sword, her royal bearing transforming into something fierce and terrible. "For Eldarion!" she cried, and the battle was joined. Aldric yanked his axe from the doorframe and met the first attacker with a blow that shattered the man's shield. 20 years of solitude, of shame and regret, fueled each strike. He was no longer the forgotten exile, but Aldric the Smith, reborn in fire and blood. Behind him, the princesses fought with desperate courage. An arrow from Briar's bow found the eye slit of a knight's helmet. Ellen moved like water between 2 attackers. Her court training transformed into lethal efficiency by Aldric's harsh lessons. But they were outnumbered, and Varen's men were battle-hardened. A sword slipped past Aldric's guard, opening a gash across his forearm. Seraphine cried out as a mailed fist struck her face. Young Lys, ignoring instructions to stay hidden, hurled a blacksmith's hammer that crushed a soldier's foot. Blood and sweat mingled with the forge's ever-present soot and ash. Aldric felt the old fire awakening in his bones, not the heat of his furnace, but the burning purpose he had abandoned decades ago. As 3 knights cornered Seraphine against the anvil, Aldric roared with a fury that shook the very foundations of the forge. "You will not touch the daughters of Aveline." The knights turned, startled by the transformation before them. No longer was he the bent gray smith, but a warrior from legend, his axe blazing in the forge's light, his eyes burning with righteous vengeance. In that moment, even Varen's men hesitated, confronted by something they had not expected to find in this forgotten corner of Eldarion. The awakening of a legend long thought dead. Blood mingled with the morning dew as the last of Varen's knights fell. Aldric stood amidst the carnage, his breathing labored, his aging body screaming in protest against movements it had not made in decades. The battle had been swift and merciless, a dance of steel and desperation that left 7 of Varen's men dead, 3 wounded, and 2 fleeing back toward the capital. "They will return," Seraphine said grimly, wiping blood from a cut above her eye. "And in greater numbers." Aldric nodded, surveying the aftermath. His forge, once a sanctuary of solitude, now bore the scars of combat. Blood-splattered walls, overturned benches, the great anvil knocked from its block, yet somehow, it felt more alive than it had in 20 years. "Are any of you seriously wounded?" he asked, turning to the princesses. They had acquitted themselves remarkably well. Ellen nursed a gashed arm. The twins supported each other, Briar limping from a sword cut to her calf. Mael and Isolde had minor wounds. Young Lee stood unharmed but wide-eyed, clutching her wooden night doll so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Nothing that will kill us," answered Seraphine, her royal composure returning despite the bruise darkening her jaw. "But we cannot stay here." "No," agreed Aldric, already moving with purpose. He knelt beside one of the fallen knights, studying the man's armor. "Help me strip them of their gear. We'll need disguises." The princesses hesitated only briefly before setting to work. Death was new to most of them, but necessity hardened even the softest hearts. Within the hour, they had assembled an odd collection of armor pieces, weapons, and supplies from the fallen. Aldric disappeared into the small chamber at the back of his forge, returning with a heavy iron chest. The wood was scorched around its edges, the lock ornate, but tarnished with age. "I had hoped never to open this again," he murmured, producing a key from a chain around his neck. Inside lay relics of another life, a master blacksmith's ceremonial hammer with the royal crest, documents bearing broken seals, and beneath them, wrapped in oilcloth, a suit of armor unlike any the princesses had seen. Not the gaudy ornamented plate of tournament knights, but something deadly in its simplicity, blackened steel with subtle raven patterns patterns etched into the breastplate. The armor of the King's Shadow, whispered Seraphine, recognition dawning in her eyes. Aldric's mouth tightened. So the stories persisted after all. Children's tales, said Ellen skeptically. The invisible guardian who protected our grandfather during the Highland Wars. Not tales, corrected Seraphine. Mother showed me the records. The King's Shadow was real, a royal protector whose identity was known only to the monarch. She looked at Aldric with new understanding. It was you. The old blacksmith didn't answer immediately, instead lifting the breastplate from its resting place. The metal gleamed dully in the forge's light, drinking in the shadows. I was many things in service to the crown, he said finally. Smith, advisor, protector, until your grandfather forgot that kings should serve their people, not merely rule them. He began donning the armor with practiced movements. Though 20 years had passed, his body remembered. Piece by piece, Aldric the Forgotten Smith transformed into something altogether more dangerous. Lord Varen never knew this identity, he continued, adjusting a vambrace. He engineered my exile as the royal blacksmith, not knowing he was also removing the King's Shadow from the court. A grim smile touched his lips, perhaps the most thorough job of undermining the throne he ever did. As the princesses watched in fascination, Aldric retrieved the final piece from the chest, a half-mask of the same blackened steel, shaped like a raven's wing that would cover the upper right portion of his face when worn. We leave within the hour, he announced. The forge is compromised. Varen's men will return by nightfall. Where will we go? Asked Lys, her young voice small in the cavernous space. To find allies, replied Aldric. If your mother truly named you regent, Princess Seraphine, then you have the authority to rally those still loyal to the crown. Loyal to a crown many believe has fallen, Seraphine pointed out. Lord Varen will have spread word that we are dead or fled in disgrace. Aldric nodded grimly. Which is why we need proof of your legitimacy beyond a ring. He turned to the chest once more, removing a false bottom to reveal a hidden compartment. From it, he withdrew a slender wooden tube sealed with wax bearing the royal crest. What I'm about to show you has been hidden for 20 years, he said, his voice solemn. A contingency your mother and I created, should the worst ever come to pass. He broke the seal and unrolled a parchment covered in flowing script. The princesses gathered close, their eyes widening as they read. A royal decree, breathed Seraphine, signed and sealed by Mother, naming you Lord Protector in times of crisis, with authority to act in her absence, until such time as the rightful heir is secure upon the throne. Aldric confirmed. Your mother was always more far-sighted than your grandfather. She foresaw that Varen's ambition would one day overwhelm his loyalty. But this gives you power equal to the regent, said Ellen, suspicion creeping into her voice. It does, agreed Aldric calmly, which is why I never used it, even when your grandfather exiled me. The document serves two purposes, to give me the authority to protect you now, and to prove to potential allies that I act with the crown's blessing. He looked at each princess in turn. I will understand if you doubt me. 20 years is a long time for grievances to fester. A tense silence fell over the forge. The younger princesses looked to Seraphine, whose face remained unreadable as she studied the document. Finally, she raised her eyes to meet Aldric's. If my mother trusted you with this power and you chose exile rather than use it against my grandfather, then I have my answer. She extended her hand. Lord Protector. Aldric took it, his calloused palm engulfing her slender fingers. Princess Regent. The formal acknowledgement hung in the air, a pact between nobility and commoner that defied the rigid hierarchies of Eldarion society. The moment was broken by Mael's urgent call from the doorway. Riders approaching from the east, not Varen's men. They bear no colors. Aldric's expression darkened. Mercenaries, then. Varen would hire sellswords to do what his knights failed at. He secured the raven mask to his face and reached for his battle axe. Gather only what you can carry. We leave through the hidden passage. Hidden passage? Echoed Lys, excitement momentarily overcoming her fear. A smith who once forged secrets for the crown keeps a few of his own, Aldric replied, moving to the back wall of the forge. With practiced movements, he shifted a seemingly immovable anvil, revealing a trap door set into the packed earth floor. This leads to a cave system beneath the northern hills. We can travel unseen for several leagues. As the princesses hurriedly gathered supplies, Aldric paused, looking around the forge that had been his prison and sanctuary for 20 years. His gaze fell upon the unfinished plow blade, still lying where he had abandoned it the day before. With deliberate steps, he returned to his workbench and lifted the simple farm tool. Such ordinary work had been his penance, his hiding place, his acceptance of defeat. He placed it in the heart of the forge fire, watching as the metal began to glow. "What are you doing?" asked Seraphine. "We must hurry." "Leaving a message," replied Aldric, lifting the red-hot metal with tongs. With 3 precise strikes of his hammer, he bent the plow blade into a new shape, a crude but unmistakable crown. He plunged it into the water barrel, where it hissed and steamed. "For Varen," he explained, placing the still warm symbol prominently on his anvil, to remind him that what can be broken can also be reforged. Outside, the approaching riders were close enough that their voices carried on the wind. Aldric gestured urgently to the trapdoor. "Go. I will follow and seal the passage behind us." One by one, the princesses descended into darkness. Seraphine went last, pausing to look back at Aldric. 20 years ago, you chose exile over compromising your principles," she said quietly. "My mother never forgot that loyalty, even when my grandfather did." Aldric nodded, touched by her words. "I failed your family once, princess. I will not fail again." As the sounds of horses and men grew louder, Aldric the smith, now reborn as the king's shadow, took one last look at the forge that had been his world. Then he followed Seraphine into the darkness, pulling the trapdoor closed above them, just as the first mercenaries burst through the front entrance. Deep below the earth, in tunnels known only to him, Aldric led the daughters of Aveline away from danger and toward an uncertain future. The weight of his armor, once so familiar, now reminded him of all he had abandoned and all he had reclaimed. For the first time in 20 years, he walked not as an exile, but as a protector with purpose. And though the path ahead was fraught with peril, Aldric felt the ember of hope that had long been cold within his chest begin to glow once more. 3 days of darkness changed them all. The winding tunnels beneath Dravencroft's hills, once mining passages, now forgotten save for in Aldric's memory, tested even the strongest among them. They traveled by the light of carefully rationed torches, their footsteps echoing in chambers untouched by human presence for generations. "How much farther?" asked Brenna, the younger twin, her voice tight with exhaustion. Aldric paused at a junction where 3 passages converged. His armor gleamed dully in the torchlight, the raven mask casting strange shadows across the stone walls. "Not far now. The eastern exit lies beyond that chamber." He pointed to a low archway ahead. The princesses had changed since leaving the forge. Gone were the fine clothes and courtly manners, replaced by practical garments cobbled together from their own riding clothes and the gear of fallen soldiers. Their hands, once soft from palace life, now bore calluses and dirt from climbing and crawling through narrow passages. Even young Lys had grown quieter, more watchful, her childish exuberance tempered by the reality of their flight. Only Seraphine maintained some semblance of her former dignity, though even she now carried herself as a warrior rather than a court lady. The bruise on her jaw had darkened to purple, a harsh badge of their new reality. "And then?" she asked, coming to stand beside Aldric. "What awaits us beyond these tunnels?" "Hawkscrest Village," he replied, "a day's march northeast of the capital, small enough to escape Varen's immediate attention, large enough to hide us while we gather information. And allies," added Seraphine. "We'll need more than information to reclaim the throne." Aldric nodded grimly. "Allies are scarce commodities in times of usurpation, princess. Men who might have stood with your mother yesterday will bow to Varen today if it means keeping their lands and titles. Then we find those whose loyalty cannot be bought," she replied firmly. "Mother always said the true strength of Eldarion lay not in its nobles but in its people." A ghost of a smile crossed Aldric's face beneath the raven mask. She learned that lesson well. They pressed on, the passage gradually widening until they emerged into a vast underground chamber. Ancient stone columns rose to support a ceiling lost in darkness, their surfaces carved with runes and symbols from a forgotten age. "The Hall of Echoes," Aldric explained, his voice hushed with reverence. "Built by the old kings before Eldarion was even a name on maps. A sacred place." The princesses spread out, marveling at the immensity of the hidden hall. Ellen ran her fingers over the strange symbols carved into a column. "I've studied the ancient texts, but I've never seen mention of this place." "Nor would you," replied Aldric. "Its existence was one of the crown's most guarded secrets. Only the monarch and the king's shadow knew of these halls." "And yet you brought us here," observed Seraphine. Another secret revealed. Aldric turned to her, his expression hidden by the mask. "Some secrets are kept to protect power, others to protect people. I judge this one worth breaking." As they crossed the vast chamber, their footsteps echoed strangely, creating harmonies that seemed to follow them like ghostly companions. Young Lys gasped in delight, spinning in a circle to watch her voice become visible as ripples of light that danced briefly across the stone floor. "Magic," whispered Mael, the usually pragmatic princess wide-eyed with wonder. "Old magic," corrected Aldric, "from when the boundaries between worlds were thinner." He gestured to a small alcove at the far side of the chamber. "Rest here. Eat. We'll continue in an hour." The princesses gratefully sank to the ground, sharing the meager rations they had carried from the forge. Aldric moved a short distance away, removing his helmet and mask to run a hand through his silver-streaked hair. The past days had taken their toll on him as well. Though he had worn the armor of the king's shadow with the ease of memory, his body was no longer that of the warrior who had earned the title. Seraphine approached, offering a water skin. "You should rest too, Lord Protector. You've barely slept since we left the forge." Aldric accepted the water with a nod of thanks. "I've grown accustomed to solitude, Princess. Sleep doesn't come easily in company." "Even royal company?" she asked with the ghost of a smile. "Especially royal company," he replied dryly. "Your presence complicates matters I had long considered settled." Seraphine's expression grew serious. "You mean your exile? Your oath to my mother. 20 years I spent convincing myself I had done all I could," Aldric said quietly, "that my banishment was the price of honor, that Eldarion would continue without me." His weathered hand clenched into a fist. "And now I find that while I hid in my forge, Varen's poison spread throughout the court. You cannot blame yourself for what Varen has done," Seraphine said firmly. "Can I not?" Aldric's voice was bitter. "I knew the man's nature. I should have." A sudden noise cut him off, a strange scraping sound from the darkness beyond the columns. Instantly, Aldric's mask was back in place, his axe in his hands. "Stay together," he commanded, gesturing the princesses into a tight group. "Something approaches." The noise grew closer, a rhythmic scraping punctuated by the tap of metal on stone. From the shadows emerged a figure that drew gasps from the princesses, an old woman, impossibly ancient, her spine bent nearly double with age. She leaned heavily on a staff topped with a strange metal symbol, a crescent moon embracing a star. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her eyes milky with cataracts, yet she moved with surprising sureness through the darkness. "Visitors in the Hall of Echoes," she croaked, her voice like dry leaves rustling. "Rare indeed. Rarer still when they wear the shadow's wings and carry royal blood." Aldric lowered his axe slightly, though his posture remained wary. "Who addresses us?" The crone cackled, the sound bouncing eerily around the chamber. "Names are power, Shadow Man. You of all should know this." She tapped her staff on the stone floor, producing a sound like a distant bell. "But if you must call me something, Keeper will suffice." "Keeper of what?" asked Lyse, peering curiously from behind Seraphine's protective arm. The old woman's blind gaze seemed to find the child unerringly. "Keeper of ways, keeper of tales, keeper of truths forgotten by your kind." She shuffled closer, sniffing the air. 10 daughters of the queen, led by the exile who refused to break. Interesting companions for these dark times. Seraphine stepped forward, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. "You know who we are." "How?" "The stones remember," replied the keeper cryptically. "They whisper to those who listen." She turned her milky gaze to Aldric. 20 years you've hidden, Shadow Man. The forge fire dimmed your light but could not extinguish it. Now you return to the old paths wearing old duties like a second skin. "We seek passage to Hawkscrest," Aldric said firmly, ignoring her words. "Nothing more." The crone's laugh echoed again. "Passage, yes, but what you seek and what you need are rarely the same." She extended a gnarled hand towards Seraphine. "Come, daughter of Aveline, let me look upon you properly." Seraphine hesitated, glancing at Aldric, who gave a reluctant nod. She stepped forward, allowing the old woman's fingers to trace her features. "Ah," breathed the keeper. "Your mother's strength, your grandfather's pride. A dangerous combination." Her fingers found the bruise on Seraphine's jaw, lingering there. "The first mark of many you will bear before this path ends." "What do you know of our path?" challenged Seraphine. "I know that Varen's treachery runs deeper than you imagine," replied the crone. "That he has allies beyond mortal courts. That what he seeks is not merely a throne, but something ancient buried beneath it." A chill seemed to sweep through the chamber. Aldric stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Speak plainly, Keeper. If you know something of Varen's plans, tell us." The old woman turned to him, her blind eyes somehow seeing through the raven mask to the man beneath. "The Serpent Lord seeks the Crown of Stars, an artifact from the Old Kingdom, said to grant dominion over life and death themselves. Your queen hid it. Varen believes her daughters know where." Seraphine's face paled. "The Crown of Stars. That's a children's tale. All tales root in truth, child." The keeper's voice grew urgent. "Varen does not merely hunt you for your claim to the throne. He believes one of you holds the key to the crown's hiding place." The princesses exchanged bewildered glances. Lyse clutched her wooden night doll tighter. "Mother never spoke of any crown except the one she wore." "She wouldn't," said Aldric suddenly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "The Crown of Stars was the realm's most closely guarded secret. Even I, as King's Shadow, was told only that it existed and must never be found." The keeper nodded approvingly. "The Shadow remembers." "Good." She shuffled away, tapping her staff against the floor in that strange bell-like tone. "Come, the eastern path is watched by Varen's mercenaries. I will show you another way." Aldric hesitated, his years of caution warring with necessity. "Why would you help us?" The old woman paused, turning back with a smile that transformed her ancient face. "Because the stones remember, Shadow Man. They remember when you stood against a king to protect his people. They remember your sacrifice." Her blind gaze swept over the princesses, and because these children are Eldarion's future, while Varen is its ending. After a moment's consideration, Aldric nodded. "Lead on, Keeper, but know that if you betray us, neither your age nor these sacred halls will protect you." The crone's laugh echoed once more. "Threats from a shadow. How delightful." She gestured with her staff. "Gather your belongings, daughters of Aveline. The path ahead grows darker before it finds the light." As the princesses hurriedly repacked their meager supplies, Seraphine moved close to Aldric. "Can we trust her?" she whispered. "No," he replied grimly, "but neither can we afford to ignore her warning. If Varen truly seeks the crown of stars." He left the thought unfinished, his expression hidden behind the raven mask. "What is this crown?" pressed Seraphine. "Why would Mother never speak of it?" Aldric's voice dropped lower still. "Because some powers should remain buried, Princess. If the old tales speak true, the crown of stars was forged before Eldarion existed, in an age when magic flowed like water. It granted its wearer power over the boundary between life and death. And Varen believes we know where it's hidden," Seraphine concluded, her face grim. "Which means he won't stop hunting us, no matter the cost." "No," agreed Aldric, "he won't." The keeper's staff struck the floor 3 times, the bell-like tone resonating through the chamber. "Time passes, Shadow Man. Decision made?" Aldric straightened, his armor catching the torchlight. "We follow, Keeper of Ways. Lead us to Hawkscrest." "Not Hawkscrest," corrected the old woman with a mysterious smile. "Somewhere far more useful." She turned, shuffling toward a narrow passage hidden behind a column. "Come, children of light. The old roads await." With wary resolve, Aldric and the 10 princesses followed the ancient crone into darkness, leaving behind the Hall of Echoes and the certainty of their original plan. Before them lay mysteries deeper than royal succession, secrets that had slumbered in Eldarion stone since before the kingdom bore its name. And far away in the capital, Lord Varen sat upon a stolen throne, his serpent banner draped across the royal seal, as he planned the extinction of Aveline's line and the dawn of an age that would make even the old kings tremble. Dawn painted the ancient stones of Ravenhold gold and crimson as Aldric stood on the parapet, his armor gleaming in the first light. Below, in the courtyard, the daughters of Aveline prepared for the day that would decide Eldarion's fate. 7 days had passed since they followed the Keeper through hidden ways to this forgotten fortress, a stronghold older than the kingdom itself, perched among the mist-shrouded peaks that marked Eldarion's northern border. Here, away from Varen's spies, they had gathered their strength and their allies. "Are you certain of this plan?" Seraphine asked, joining him at the parapet. No longer the exhausted fugitive, she now stood tall in armor forged by Aldric's own hands, silver plate with raven feathers etched across the breastplate, marking her as both royal heir and warrior. "No plan survives first contact with the enemy," Aldric replied grimly, "but we have little choice. Varen's ritual begins at midnight." The Keeper's revelations had proven true. In the secret library of Ravenhold, they had discovered ancient texts speaking of the Crown of Stars and its terrible power. More disturbing still were the scrolls describing the ritual of awakening, a ceremony requiring both the crown and the blood of royal lineage, performed when the hunter's moon reached its zenith. "He still doesn't have the crown," Seraphine reminded him. "Mother hid it well." Aldric's hand tightened on the stone battlement. "But he has your mother, Princess." And after a week of Varen's questioning, even the strongest will can break. The truth had reached them 3 days past, carried by a raven bearing the Queen's personal seal. Queen Aveline lived, imprisoned in the deepest dungeon beneath the royal palace. Varen kept her alive only because he believed she knew the crown's location, a secret she had refused to divulge despite increasingly brutal interrogation. The message, written in the Queen's own blood, had been brief. "The crown lies where the first king fell. Varen must not find it. Save the kingdom, not me." "She won't break," Seraphine said with quiet certainty, "and neither will we." Below, the courtyard bustled with activity. The princesses had changed profoundly during their time at Ravenhold. No longer sheltered nobles, they had become commanders in their own right. Ellen and Mael drilled a company of archers recruited from the northern villages. The twins, Briar and Brenna, inspected a row of horses with the expert eyes of cavalry officers. Even young Lys moved with newfound purpose, delivering messages between groups with solemn efficiency. Most surprising were the forces that had rallied to their banner. Not great lords with their household knights, but common folk with uncommon courage. Miners and farmers, hunters and blacksmiths, all who had suffered under Varen's harsh rule even before his usurpation. They came bearing whatever weapons they could find, pitchforks and hunting bows, woodcutters' axes and ancient family swords. They fight for you, Aldric observed, not for the crown, but for the daughters of Aveline who treat them as equals, rather than subjects. Seraphine smiled faintly. Mother always said a ruler's strength comes from the people, not from the throne. A lesson Varen never learned, Aldric agreed. His power comes from fear and dark magic. It cannot last. A horn sounded from the courtyard, 3 short blasts signaling the arrival of their final allies. The massive gates of Ravenhold swung open to admit a company of riders bearing no standard. Their armor mismatched but serviceable, their faces grim with purpose. At their head rode a woman whose presence drew Aldric up straight, disbelief evident even through his raven mask. She wore battle-scarred plate armor beneath a faded blue cloak, her silver-streaked hair bound in a warrior's knot. At her hip hung a sword whose hilt Aldric would have recognized in the darkest night. "Elora," he whispered, the name torn from his throat. Seraphine looked between them, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Your wife, my wife who died 20 years ago," Aldric replied, his voice hollow with shock. "Or so I was told." Without another word, he descended from the parapet, taking the stone steps 3 at a time. By the time he reached the courtyard, Elora had dismounted, directing her riders with the easy authority of a seasoned commander. She turned as he approached, her weathered face showing no surprise at his appearance. "The king's shadow walks again," she observed, her voice deeper than he remembered, marked by years and hardship. "I wondered if Aveline would call you back." "Elora," Aldric said again, removing his mask with trembling hands. "How?" "Later," she replied, though her eyes softened at the sight of his face. "We have little time. Varen's forces march on the temple of the first king. He has divined the crown's location." Seraphine joined them, her expression grave. "You're certain?" Elora nodded sharply. "My scouts confirmed it an hour past. The Serpent Lord rides with his elite guard and 3 hooded figures, mages by their appearance." "And my mother?" asked Seraphine. A shadow crossed Elora's face. "She lives, but barely. They transport her in a cage, like an animal. Varen means to use her blood for the ritual." Aldric's expression hardened, his moment of personal shock subsumed by the immediate threat. "Then we ride now, not at midday as planned. How many men does Varen have?" 200 knights, plus the mages," replied Elora. "They travel light for speed." Aldric turned to Seraphine. "Princess." She was already nodding, mind racing through calculations. "We have 160 fighters plus your wife's company. We're outnumbered, but we have surprise. If we can reach the temple first." "We can," interrupted the keeper, appearing silently beside them. The ancient woman seemed stronger here among the old stones of Ravenhold, her back straighter, her milky eyes somehow more seeing. "The old roads will take you there ahead of Varen's forces." "Old roads?" questioned Elora, suspicion evident in her tone. "Paths of power," explained Aldric, "known only to the keeper and those she trusts. We use them to reach Ravenhold." Elora's eyes narrowed at the old woman. "And what price do you ask for this aid, keeper?" The crone smiled, revealing teeth worn to nubs with age. "The same price always, warrior wife. That what is meant to sleep remains undisturbed. The crown of stars was not meant for mortal hands. Not in the old days and certainly not now." "Then we are agreed," said Seraphine firmly. "We destroy the crown rather than claim it." The keeper nodded approvingly. Wisdom from one so young. Perhaps Eldarion might flourish under such a queen. Orders spread rapidly through the courtyard. Within the hour, their force was assembled. A strange army of commoners and princesses, led by the king's shadow, and a wife returned from presumed death. The keeper guided them to a seamless stone arch at Ravenhold's rear, unmarked and seemingly unremarkable. "The old road," she announced, tapping her staff against the stone. The arch shimmered, revealing a path that twisted impossibly through mist and shadow. "It will lead you directly to the temple grounds, but be warned, the old ways respond to intention. Enter with thoughts of conquest or power, and you may never emerge." Aldric turned to their assembled force. "Think only of protection," he instructed, "of family, of home, of the people you fight for. Nothing else." He looked to Seraphine, who nodded and addressed the fighters. "Today, we face not just a usurper, but a threat to everything Eldarion stands for. Lord Varen seeks power beyond mortal understanding, power that would make him not just king, but tyrant over life and death itself." Her voice strengthened, carrying across the courtyard. "We fight not for a crown of gold, but for the future of our kingdom, for your families, your villages, your right to live without fear. A cheer rose from the assembled fighters, not the practiced battle cry of professional soldiers, but the raw determination of people defending their own. Aldric donned his raven mask once more and lifted his axe. "For Eldarion," he called. "For Eldarion," came the thunderous response. With Aldric and Seraphine in the lead, they entered the shimmering arch, disappearing into mist and memory. Elora followed with her riders, then the princesses with their units. Last came young Lys, who paused to look back at the keeper. "Will you come with us?" she asked. The ancient woman shook her head, smiling gently. "My battles ended long ago, child, but I will be watching." She pressed something into Lys's hand, a small stone carved with the same crescent and star symbol that topped her staff. "Keep this close. When the moment comes, you will know what to do." Confused but trusting, Lys nodded and stepped through the arch, the last of their force to enter the old road. The temple of the first king rose from the misty plains, like a memory-made stone, a circular structure of weathered granite pillars surrounding a central altar. No roof covered it. Instead, it opened directly to the sky, where the hunter's moon would soon rise to its zenith. When Aldric's forces emerged from the old road, the temple grounds were deserted save for ancient shadows and whispering grass. They deployed swiftly, taking positions among the surrounding trees and rocky outcroppings. Archers climbed to vantage points, infantry concealed themselves behind fallen columns, and the princesses established a command position with clear sightlines to all approaches. "Varen will come from the south," Elora reported, returning from a scouting mission. "His vanguard is less than an hour away." Aldric nodded grimly. "And the crown? If Mother's message is correct, it's hidden within the altar itself," said Seraphine. "Where the first king fell refers to King Eldar, who was assassinated at this very spot during a ritual sacrifice." They approached the altar cautiously, a massive stone table carved with symbols similar to those in the Hall of Echoes. Centuries of rain and wind had softened its edges, but the power it contained felt undiminished. At its center lay a circular depression, the keystone, murmured Aldric, running his hand over the indentation. "But what is the key?" Lys stepped forward, the keeper's stone clutched in her small hand. "Maybe this?" she suggested, holding it up. The stone glowed faintly in the gathering dusk, its crescent and star symbol pulsing with inner light. Aldric and Seraphine exchanged glances. "The keeper's final gift," said Seraphine softly. "Try it, Lys." With solemn care, the youngest princess placed the stone in the depression. It fit perfectly, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then a grinding sound emerged from beneath the altar, and a hidden compartment slid open, revealing a bundle wrapped in ancient cloth. Aldric reached for it with reverent caution, unwrapping the layers to reveal what lay within. Collective gasps rose from those gathered close enough to see. The crown of stars belied its name. No stars adorned it. Instead, it appeared to be fashioned from a single piece of midnight black metal, so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. Only when viewed from certain angles did pinpricks of brilliance appear within its depths, like distant stars glimpsed through the void between worlds. "It's beautiful," whispered Seraphine, her hand hovering near but not touching the artifact. "And terrible," added Aldric. "You feel it, don't you? The hunger." She nodded, drawing her hand back. "What do we do with it? We can't destroy something this powerful without proper tools or knowledge." Before Aldric could respond, a horn sounded from the southern approach, 3 long, mournful notes that echoed across the temple grounds. "Varen," said Elora grimly, drawing her sword. "Positions, everyone. Remember the plan." The princesses scattered to their assigned units, each taking command with a confidence that would have been unimaginable weeks ago. Aldric carefully rewrapped the crown and handed it to Seraphine. "Keep it close," he instructed. "If all else fails, flee with your sisters. The kingdom's future matters more than any single battle." Seraphine accepted the bundle with a nod. "And my mother?" "I will find her," promised Aldric, his voice leaving no room for doubt. He turned to Elora, so many unspoken words hanging between them. "We have much to discuss when this is over." She offered a tight smile. "Yes, we do." Then, unexpectedly, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his cheek. "Don't die again, husband." "I never died the first time," he replied softly, before replacing his mask and moving to his position at the temple's northern edge. Varen's forces arrived with military precision, columns of knights in gleaming armor bearing the emerald serpent banner, flanked by hooded figures whose robes seemed to writhe with unnatural shadows. In their midst rolled a black iron cage atop a wagon, and within it, barely visible, lay a woman in tattered royal robes. "Mother!" gasped Seraphine, her hand tightening on her sword hilt. At the head of the procession rode Lord Varen himself, a tall figure in ornate armor of emerald and gold, his helmet fashioned in the likeness of a serpent. He raised his hand, and the procession halted at the temple's edge. "I know you're here, daughters of Aveline," he called, his voice carrying unnaturally in the still air. "Your pitiful attempts at stealth are beneath you. Show yourselves, and I may yet be merciful." Silence answered him. Varen laughed, the sound cold and confident. "No? Then perhaps your mother's screams will draw you out." He gestured to his guards. "Bring the queen to the altar. The ritual begins now, with or without her cooperation." It was the signal they had awaited. From all sides arrows hissed through the air, finding gaps in armor and dropping a dozen of Varen's knights before they could draw their weapons. The battle erupted with controlled chaos as Aldric's forces emerged from their hiding places, engaging the surprised enemy. Elora led her riders in a devastating charge through Varen's left flank, while the twins directed a company of spearmen against his right. The princesses fought as one unit, cutting a path directly toward their mother's cage. Aldric moved like a shadow through the melee, his axe rising and falling with deadly precision. He was no longer the forgotten exile or even the king's shadow. He was vengeance incarnate, each strike fueled by 20 years of waiting. Knights twice his age fell before him, their skills no match for his focused fury. The battle raged across the temple grounds, the advantage shifting moment by moment. Varen's forces had numbers and training, but Aldric's fighters had righteous purpose and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Blood darkened the ancient stones as the hunter's moon rose higher, its crimson light washing over friend and foe alike. Seraphine fought her way to her mother's cage, Lys close behind her. With a mighty swing, she shattered the lock, flinging the door open. "Mother!" she cried, reaching for the frail figure within. Queen Aveline raised her head, her once beautiful face gaunt with suffering. "Seraphine," she whispered, "the crown." "We have it," Seraphine assured her, helping her mother from the cage. "It's safe." The queen's eyes widened with alarm. "No, you must destroy it. Varen's ritual." Too late. They realized the trap. The three hooded mages had not joined the battle, but instead completed a triangle around the temple center, their voices rising in eldritch chant. The ground beneath the altar began to glow with sickly green light, pulsing in rhythm with their words. "Fools!" Varen's voice boomed across the battlefield as he cut down two farmers with a single sweep of his sword. "The ritual doesn't require the physical crown, only its awakening, and for that, I need only royal blood spilled upon consecrated ground." He pointed his bloody sword at Seraphine and her mother. "Blood you have so conveniently delivered to me." The mage's chant reached a crescendo, and the green light shot upward in a column, connecting earth to sky. The wrapped bundle containing the crown began to vibrate in Seraphine's belt pouch, emitting a high-pitched whine that cut through the sounds of battle. "Stop them!" shouted Aldric, fighting desperately toward the altar. But the mages were protected by a circle of Varen's elite guards, who formed an impenetrable wall of steel. Queen Aveline struggled to her feet, pulling something from within her tattered robes, a dagger with a blade of the same strange black metal as the crown. "Only one way," she gasped to Seraphine. "The ritual must be completed or interrupted. There is no middle ground." Understanding dawned in Seraphine's eyes. "Mother, no!" But the queen was already moving, her weakened body finding one last reserve of strength. She staggered toward the nearest mage, dagger raised. "For Eldarion!" she cried, plunging the blade into the mage's heart. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The green column of light shattered, fragments of magical energy raining down like broken glass. The mage collapsed, his dying screams merging with the sudden silence of his companions. The magical backlash threw everyone nearby to the ground, including Varen, who had nearly reached the altar. In the moment of stunned quiet that followed, Queen Aveline turned to her daughter, blood staining her hands. "The crown!" she demanded, her voice stronger than it had been. "Quickly!" Seraphine handed over the wrapped bundle. With trembling fingers, Aveline unwrapped it, revealing the crown of stars. Its darkness seemed to deepen in her hands, the pinpricks of light within it swirling like a galaxy in motion. "Mother!" pleaded Seraphine. "Don't touch it!" "The keeper said, 'I know what must be done,'" interrupted Aveline. She looked past her daughter to where Aldric fought toward them, his armor dented, but his spirit unbroken. "He was right, you know. Some powers should remain buried." With those words, she placed the crown upon her head. The world seemed to hold its breath. The fighting faltered as all eyes turned to the queen, standing tall despite her injuries, the crown of stars a void against her silver hair. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Aveline began to glow, not with the sickly green of Varen's ritual, but with clear white light that emanated from within. Her wounds healed before their eyes, her posture straightening, her face regaining its former beauty and strength. "No!" screamed Varen, staggering to his feet. "The crown is mine!" Aveline turned to him, her eyes now shining with the same starlight that swirled within the crown. "The crown belongs to no one, Varen. It is a trust, not a possession." She raised her hands, and the light surrounding her expanded outward in a wave, washing over the battlefield. Where it touched Varen's forces, they froze in place, unable to move or speak. Where it touched the wounded among Aldric's fighters, their injuries began to heal. Aldric finally reached the altar, his axe lowered. "My queen," he said, kneeling before her. Aveline smiled sadly. "My faithful shadow, you kept your oath, even when the crown forgot its own." She looked to her daughters, gathered now around her. "And you, my brave girls, have proven yourselves worthy successors." "Mother," said Seraphine urgently, "the crown, its power is too great. The keeper warned us." "Yes," agreed Aveline. "It was never meant for mortal hands. The first kings knew this. They sealed it away for a reason." She touched the crown with reverent fingers. "But once awakened, it cannot simply be hidden again." Lys stepped forward, clutching the keeper's stone that had unlocked the altar. "What will you do?" Aveline knelt to embrace her youngest daughter. "What queens must always do, my love. Protect the future even at great cost." She straightened and addressed them all. "The crown of stars was forged to maintain balance between worlds. For centuries, it lay dormant, its power contained. Varen's ritual disturbed that balance." She looked to the frozen form of the usurper. "Now it must be restored." Aldric's face paled behind his mask, as understanding dawned. "My queen, there must be another way." "There isn't," she replied gently. "You know this, old friend. Some sacrifices cannot be avoided, only accepted with grace." The light surrounding Aveline intensified, becoming almost too bright to look upon. She embraced each of her daughters in turn, whispering private words to each. When she came to Seraphine, she removed a ring from her finger, not the royal signet, but a simple band of silver. "Rule wisely," she said, pressing the ring into Seraphine's palm. "Rule kindly. Remember that true power comes from service, not dominion." Finally, she turned to Aldric. 20 years ago, you chose honor over comfort. Today, I make the same choice." She smiled, the expression transcendent. "Watch over them, my shadow. Your exile is ended." Before anyone could respond, Aveline raised her arms and spoke words in a language none recognized, the ancient tongue of the Old Kingdom. The crown of stars blazed with sudden, unbearable brightness, and the queen began to dissolve into pure light, her physical form merging with the power she had unleashed. "Mother!" cried the princesses in unified grief, but Queen Aveline was beyond hearing. The transformation completed in a heartbeat that seemed to last forever, the queen's body becoming light, the crown melding with her essence, until nothing remained but a column of radiance stretching from the altar to the heavens. The column pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and then contracted violently before exploding outward in a silent wave of power that swept across Eldarion and beyond. Where it passed, flowers bloomed from barren earth, wounds healed, and the weary found new strength. When vision cleared, the altar stood empty. Of Queen Aveline and the crown of stars, nothing remained save a single silver feather that floated gently down to rest in Seraphine's outstretched hand. Varen and his forces, released from their magical paralysis, found themselves surrounded by Aldric's fighters, the usurper's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "What have you done?" he screamed at Seraphine. "Where is the crown?" "Gone," she replied simply, closing her hand around the silver feather. "Beyond your reach or anyone's, forever." Varen lunged at her with his sword, blind with fury, but Aldric was faster, stepping between them to block the strike with his axe. The weapons met with a thunderous clang, steel against steel in age-old contest. "Your time is ended, Serpent Lord," growled Aldric, driving Varen back with the sheer force of his assault. The usurper fought with the desperation of a man who knows his dreams are ashes, but he was no match for Aldric's righteous fury. In 3 brutal exchanges, the king's shadow disarmed him, sending Varen's ornate sword spinning away across the blood-soaked ground. Varen fell to his knees, his serpent helmet knocked askew to reveal the face beneath, handsome still, despite the years, but twisted with malice and thwarted ambition. "Finish it," he spat. "You've waited 20 years for this moment, Blacksmith." Aldric raised his axe, decades of injustice lending weight to his arm. Varen closed his eyes, awaiting the killing blow. No, the single word, spoken in Seraphine's clear voice, stayed Aldric's hand. She stepped forward, her mother's simple silver ring now on her finger. "He will face justice," she continued. "Real justice, before the people he has wronged, not murder in the heat of battle." Aldric lowered his axe slowly, his breathing ragged. "As you command, my queen." Around them, the remaining knights of Varen's force laid down their weapons, seeing their leader defeated and their cause lost. The mages were dead or fled. The battle was won. Alora approached, blood-spattered but unbowed, leading her riders in a protective formation around the princesses. "The temple is secured. We have prisoners awaiting your judgment." Seraphine nodded, the weight of her new role settling visibly upon her shoulders. "Tend to the wounded first. Then we return to the capital." She looked to her sisters, who stood tall despite their grief. "All of us." As dawn broke over the temple of the first king, the daughters of Aveline prepared to reclaim their birthright. Varen and his officers were bound and placed under heavy guard. The dead, those who had fallen on both sides, were laid out with dignity, awaiting proper rites. Aldric stood apart on a small rise, his raven mask removed, his face turned toward the rising sun. Alora joined him, her hand finding his with the familiarity of one who had never truly been absent. 20 years, she said softly. "So much time lost." "Not lost," Aldric replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Just waiting." He turned to her, his weathered face earnest in the morning light. "Varen told me you had died in childbirth, our son with you." Elora's expression softened with old pain. "Gareth did die, but I survived, though barely. When I recovered, I found you had been exiled. Varen's men watched me constantly. I couldn't reach you without putting us both in danger. So you formed your company of riders instead," Aldric concluded, "fighting Varen from the shadows while I hid in my forge. We each did what we could," she said firmly, "and now we have a future again." She glanced toward the princesses, no, the queen and her sisters, who stood together in quiet dignity despite their loss. "All of us do." Seraphine approached them, her back straight, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Lord Protector," she said formally, "the realm owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Aldric bowed his head. "I did only what I swore to do, your majesty. Nevertheless," she continued, "I would ask one more service of you, if you are willing." She looked between him and Alora. "Eldarion needs rebuilding. It needs leaders who understand both nobility and common folk, who can bridge the gap my mother always sought to close." Understanding dawned in Aldric's eyes. "You honor us, but I am a blacksmith, not a—" "You are the king's shadow," interrupted Seraphine. "The queen's champion, a master craftsman and a warrior of legend." She smiled faintly. "And you make an excellent teacher, as my sisters and I can attest." She held out her hand, upon which rested her mother's signet ring alongside the simple silver band. "I would name you Lord Chancellor of Eldarion, and your wife Master of Arms. Together, you would help me forge a kingdom where worth is measured by deeds, not birth." Aldric looked to Alora, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He knelt before Seraphine, taking her offered hand. "For Eldarion," he said, his voice firm with renewed purpose. "For your mother's memory, for the future she sacrificed to protect." As the sun climbed higher, bathing the ancient temple in golden light, Queen Seraphine I raised the blacksmith to his feet. No longer an exile, no longer a shadow, but a cornerstone of the new kingdom they would build together from the ashes of the old. And somewhere beyond mortal sight, among the stars that had given the crown its name, Queen Aveline watched over her daughters and smiled. The blacksmith who had lived in silence for 20 years found his voice once more, not in the clash of hammer on anvil, but in the councils of the realm. The 10 noble ladies who had knocked at his forgotten forge became legends in their own right, warrior princesses who helped forge a golden age for Eldarion, and the crown of stars passed into myth, a tale told to remind kings and commoners alike that true power lies not in dominion over others, but in sacrifice for their sake. In the heart of the capital, where Queen Seraphine raised her throne, a simple forge was built in the castle courtyard. There, on special days, Lord Chancellor Aldric would remove his fine robes, don his smith's apron, and work the metal as he had always done, creating beauty from raw elements, strength from fire and persistence. And if, on quiet nights when the hunter's moon rode high, the people of Eldarion sometimes glimpsed a figure of light walking the battlements beside their queen, a crowned woman whose footsteps left silver feathers in their wake, they spoke of it only in whispers with gratitude rather than fear. For some legends are meant to be remembered, some sacrifices honored, and some silences finally broken. Across Eldarion, from the highest tower to the humblest cottage, they tell the tale of the lonely blacksmith and the 10 noble ladies, a story that reminds us all that true nobility forges itself in the fires of adversity, hammered on the anvil of courage, and tempered in the cooling waters of compassion. The crown may rest on a single head, but its weight is carried by the hands of all who serve with honor and love. This is the legacy of Aldric the Smith and Queen Aveline, a kingdom where worth is measured not by the circumstances of one's birth, but by the choices made when darkness darkness threatens, and light seems most distant. In times of trouble, the people of Eldarion still look to the stars and whisper their thanks to the Queen, who became one with the heavens to save them all. And in times of peace, they remember the blacksmith who taught them that even the most ordinary hands can forge extraordinary destinies. May we all find such courage when our own moments of truth arrive. May we all choose honor over comfort, service over dominion, love over fear. For in the end, these are the qualities that make both queens and blacksmiths truly great.